Was the Apostle Paul the original Antichrist? Former minister and Bible college graduate Jeffrey Daugherty raises this and other staggering questions from the New Testament itself. The Christian Whistleblower asks if Jesus' original message has been warped into a fear and guilt-based control matrix. Here's Ali with more.
Thanks, Seb. Daugherty's 35 years of research challenge everyone to consider new perspectives and ask themselves, just what lies behind my religion? Are we born with original sin or the spark of divinity within?
Deep questions, Ali. Thanks. The Christian Whistleblower. We'll be watching.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is not late night in the heartland, but it is. Thank you very much. We have a very special presentation today, a late morning in the heartland presentation. We're going to be welcoming in Dr. Shiva today, and we appreciate him taking time out of his busy schedule to be here. We look forward to learning some interesting things and getting some inspiration from Dr. Shiva. Tonight, we will be back as usual at 10 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Central, straight through till midnight. We have a discussion about a certain topic that is on my mind. And I'll be frank with you right now at 10:02 a.m. I have no idea what we're going to talk about at 10:02 p.m. tonight, but we know it's going to be provocative. We know it's going to be interesting, and we know it's going to be something that helps you unindoctrinate yourself, because there is no more important message, I think, in the entire world, and certainly no more important message that we send out other than you are divine, you are sovereign, and you are free. And you do not have original sin. You've got the spark of divinity within. So you don't have to go on bended knee to somebody else's savior, because, again, you are divine, you are sovereign, and you are free. And we're here to make sure that message goes out to as many people as can possibly hear it. And that's what we're here for. It's the Unindoctrination Station, and this is a special edition of Late Night in the Heartland. We're going to have Dr. Shiva joining us in just a few minutes. I just received some contact from Barnabas Nagy. He is willing to come back on the show and talk about Tartaria. I know many of you have been very interested to hear about Tartaria and want to talk more about it. So we will definitely bring him on for that. Brandon says it's the spiciest channel around. Many people offering welcome to Dr. Shiva. He's not quite here yet, but we appreciate the fact that he's taking out. Electric Tragedy's been following Dr. Shiva since the beginning of the pandemic. Brandon says he's very intelligent, talking about his his scholastic background. Laura has to take her kitten to the vet. We understand that. No hate on you whatsoever. People giving me ideas for some merchandise. We will get back into that for sure. That kind of fell by the wayside to a certain extent, but we're definitely going to, get some things back. Some more I'm divine, I'm sovereign, I'm free t-shirts. Those were a huge hit, and we never should have let them go. And we'll go ahead and bring those back, and we'll get some other things done as well, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm just killing a little bit of time here, but we appreciate all of you. And I want to just continue to encourage you. As I'm looking at Epoch Times, and an armed citizen stops a robbery at a Chick-fil-A in Atlanta. And I continue to remind you that Tombstone had very little problem with armed shootings and mass shootings for obvious reasons. But I want to encourage you to, if you have ideas, if you have things that you think would make a good show, don't hesitate to send those ideas to me. Don't hesitate to suggest. Don't hesitate to say, hey, look, what about this? Because it's many of the shows that you see here come directly from, I was going to say citizens. I'm reading a headline from subscriber suggestions. An armed person stopped an attempted burglary in Atlanta, police said. March 8th, 3:03 p.m., officers responded to a Chick-fil-A in Peachtree Street, which is right in downtown Atlanta. Upon arrival, they spoke with witnesses who stated that a black male walked inside, produced a firearm, and demanded money. The employees fled, and the suspect exited, but nearby citizens confronted the suspect as he was leaving. One of the citizens was armed, and at some point during the confrontation, fired several shots. He ran away on foot, was apprehended nearby, and was held until the police arrived. So good on the person in Atlanta who stopped the robbery. You might want to go out on the range and get some practice in, because if you're in a situation like that, you want to be accurate, because you certainly don't want bullets flying around and hurting other people. But good for you for being there, and good for you for trying, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very important that we do arm ourselves, in my opinion. Very important that we learn how to use our firearms in a responsible manner. Folks, if you haven't heard of Dr. Shiva, you're missing out. He's a scientist, he's an inventor, he's a fighter, and he is a person that offers solutions across many disciplines for us. He is the inventor of email and polymath. He holds 4 degrees from MIT, which I heard is a pretty decent school. And he's a world-renowned systems scientist, inventor, and entrepreneur. He's a Fulbright scholar, a Lemelson MIT Awards finalist, India's first outstanding scientist and technologist of Indian origin, the Westinghouse Science Talent Honors Award recipient, a nominee for the U.S. National Medal of Technology and Innovation. And interestingly enough, his love of medicine and complex systems began in India when he became intrigued with medicine at the age of 5, when his grandmother, who was a farmer and healer in their small village, he would watch her apply systems of traditional medicine to heal and support local villagers. Now, these early experiences inspired him to pursue the study of modern systems science, information technology, and Eastern and traditional systems of medicine to develop an integrative framework linking Eastern and Western systems of medicine. He has experience across the board, and he did have a recent run against Elizabeth Warren, which he came up a little bit short on, but he left us with what I think is the greatest slogan in the history of American politics. It takes a real Indian to beat a fake Indian. And with that, may I introduce to you, it's my honor to welcome Dr. Shiva to our program today. Doctor, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here, Jeffrey. Yeah, Jeffrey, just to be clear, I'm just also going to be co-streaming here. But one of the things is that I ran in 2018, just factually, against Elizabeth Warren. And we had an incredible election. We had, the GOP in Massachusetts is basically a wing of the Democratic Party.
Right.
So I had to, and they ran a guy who actually photoshopped a picture with Trump. There's 3 hands in the picture. That's the kind of people they ran to confuse the actual Trumpers on the ground that this guy was a Trumper. So I had to run as an independent. We got 100,000 votes, 5 times more than any independent candidate in U.S. Senate history. But in 2020, I actually ran as a Republican, and the GOP attempted to do the same. If anything, the GOP will talk about was involved in election fraud in cahoots with the Democrats, because they wanted their designated loser to win. So I wouldn't defeat the Democrat. So that's just to give you a little bit of background.
And Dr. Shiva, it's my opinion, I've studied that race a little bit, and I don't know if you would concur with this. I think you might. But from what we know about the Dominion servers and all the shenanigans that are going on in electoral politics, I'm convinced that you actually were the true winner of that election, and it was flat stolen from you. How would you comment on that?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So first of all, I think that one of the most important things to understand is that in the United States, starting in 2002, Jeffrey, we no longer have, at least since 2002, we no longer have elections. We actually have selections. And this is something that's hard for people to understand. So we have selections, not elections. And by the way, the history of election fraud goes all the way back to, I think, the 1857, I forget the exact year, when it was Rutherford B. Hayes against Tilden. And it's unfortunate none of the Trump's lawyers ever brought that event up, because it was settled in the House of Representatives.
Known as the great controversy in American politics.
Right. And in fact, when you actually study history, you'll find out that the basis of the Civil War actually occurred also because of election fraud, interesting enough,
Yes,
what occurred in Kansas. So there's some very profound things that have taken place in American history directly connected to how elections were being run or not being run. And a lot of that was not brought up. But anyway, what we learned in Massachusetts was when we ran in 2020, we ran in the Republican primary. And you have to understand, both Republicans and Democrats are involved in this. It's not just the Democrats. The Republicans and the Democrats, and in the recent times, they use the electronic voting machines, which are released. It's not just Dominion, all of them have a feature where you can embed in computer algorithms to multiply candidates' votes by a factor. Okay, so Jeffrey, if you got 1,000 votes, and I use this example, and I got 1,000 votes, your votes could be multiplied by, let's say, a factor of 10, and my votes could be multiplied by a factor of 0.1 or 1. Okay, or 0.1, right? So I end up getting 100 votes, you end up getting 10,000 votes. This is a feature that's in these voting systems. If you go back to 2002 and you look on the Diebold voting systems, page 2-126, it's right there. It's called a weighted race feature. What that means is you can take someone's race, election results they got, and weight it by a factor. Okay? You can multiply it by a factor. It's quite extraordinary. So that feature has been there since 2002, and both parties. Remember, the state election directors are the ones who certify these voting machines, the state election directors. And those voting machines have been certified by state election directors, Democrats and Republicans. And the National Association of State Election Directors is an organization which services, it's a nonprofit funded by the Rockefellers and the Murdochs, left and right. Okay? So what came out I think the historic thing about our lawsuit is, first of all, it's the only lawsuit, 2 of them, that have not been, thrown out of court, not been dismissed. The most important thing is that on September 1st, when I ran in the Republican primary, I mean, the word on the street, Jeffrey, was landslide, landslide, landslide. I mean, we worked our butts off. And I'm not talking about students like Bernie supporters. We're talking about everyday working people were our supporters. Everyday working people. This means people had work. They would come out and do a standout for us. They would have work. They would, put up lawn signs. They had a full-time job. Then they would go, put up bumper stickers. So we raised close to $2 million. It was a bottoms-up movement, close to, 10,000 lawn signs, 20,000 bumper stickers. We had 14 major billboards. We were everywhere. The Massachusetts GOP are the real snakes here. The Massachusetts GOP is run by a guy called Jim Lyons, who never even wanted a Trump sign on his lawn. And then he starts wearing the MAGA hat, okay? Uses Trump and the election issue to raise money for the GOP, which is basically the right wing or the left wing of the Democratic Party in Massachusetts. So when I ran, I scared the hell out of them because it was a bottoms-up movement, a working class guy like me who came from nothing, from India originally, and then from working class towns in New Jersey, who actually earned 4 degrees, created 7 companies, created a lot of jobs. This scares these guys. And it's not Republicans versus Democrats, they're both one. That's what we need to realize. This dialectic of left and right, Republican and Democrat, is completely nonsense. It's created to manipulate the public that there is some 2-party system or opposition. It's like WWF wrestling. So it wasn't the Democrats who did this to me. It was the Massachusetts GOP. And they're the ones who made sure they found a guy who was a no-name, a lawyer, part of their Republican elite. They found him. And this guy had no lawn signs, no bumper stickers, no campaign, no organization. We had 3,000 volunteers, a real organization, call centers, everything. So election day comes on September 1st, 2020. And I was campaigning all the way to the end. We hit nearly every town in Massachusetts, all 351 towns. I never saw this guy anywhere campaigning. We'd go to a Walmart, there'd be 500, 600 people there on a that's a lot of people for a U.S. Senate race in a primary race.
That's more people than Joe Biden used to get out, Dr. Shiva.
Well, exactly. And well, this guy was worse than Joe Biden. He was probably as dumb or dumber than him, but he didn't even campaign at all. And again, it was the GOP that backed this guy against someone like me, who they should have backed, because if anything, I represent the American dream coming up from below, which should be the values that the Republican Party espouses, right? Meritocracy, all those things. But there is no party differences anymore. So what do we find out on September 1st? We find out that the results are that in Franklin County, which is a white working class county, I win by 10 points. And that county, 90% of the votes are hand counted. In every other county, this is a guy from Greenwich, Connecticut, with his snotty nosed accent, that kind of thing. He wins in all black Brockton, all Hispanic Lawrence. But most importantly, he wins 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, 60-40, 60-40. Okay. And that's, up until that point, Joe, people had said, hey, Shiva, the only way you're going to lose is if you have election fraud, right? And I said, it doesn't. I sort of thought about it, but I said, it occurs in India or it occurs in Africa, but not in America. So my speech that night, my quote unquote concession speech was, election fraud took place in third world Massachusetts. And I said, I'm glad we have, the First and Second Amendment still, right? So that began my journey as a mathematician, as a scientist, as an engineer, as an American, to find out what was actually going on. And I had a lot of help from all sorts of people who've been looking at this for 20, 30 years. And I found out that in these voting machines, so in the other counties, they use electronic voting machines where when a ballot is taken, it's scanned, Jeffrey. It's scanned. And so in the case, so let's say you have two situations here. You have the paper ballot over here, which is counted by a human being in Franklin County, right? In the other counties, the paper ballot is scanned. It is put through a voting machine, which takes literally a picture of it. What a human being is not counting that ballot, a machine is. And what is a machine counting? Not the paper ballot. It's counting the scan, which is called a ballot image. Okay?
Right.
The ballot image is what's being counted. Now, you would think that the ballot image is a legal document, that it should be preserved because it is what is counted. According to federal law, it's supposed to be preserved, the ballot image, because that is the ballot. So the paper ballot is for humans counting. The ballot image is for the computer. So we found out that so I went and issued a FOIA and I said, I want the ballot images. And we have a video live where the Secretary of State's office saying, we delete those images. We don't have to save them. So it took them 10 days to put that in writing. In a series of 4 email conversations, they're admitting they delete them. They're admitting they don't have to by Massachusetts law, which is not true because by federal law, this is a federal election. Those 4 email interactions, and I said, look, you violated federal law. I put up on Twitter on September 25th, and on 26th, I'm thrown off Twitter. I've never been thrown off. I've written about all sorts of controversial stuff. And I'm thrown off because I was exposing that the government of Massachusetts was violating federal law. So as this gets more interesting, a newspaper, one of these fact-checking newspapers, writes a story saying, "Oh no, I'm not telling the truth. That ballots were in fact preserved." I never talked about ballots, Jeffrey. I talked about ballot images. But in that hit job news story, fortunate to me, they had actually talked to the Secretary of State, who admitted to them in the interview that they had contacted Twitter to throw me off. So let me explain that. It wasn't Twitter took the action. It was the government contacted Twitter to throw me off. So I knew, first of all, I had the election, fraud issue, which is a lawsuit unto itself. Then you have the fact that Twitter apparently threw me off, but that's Section 230. That'll take forever to adjudicate. But I had a big winner here because the government, and I remember I had moved my campaign by that point into a write-in campaign. So I was still running for federal office because all of our volunteers were out there campaigning still. So they threw off a federal U.S. Senate candidate, the government did, which is the most egregious violation of speech because the First Amendment was created, number one, to protect you and I so the government couldn't throw us off, okay? The government couldn't shut down speech. Remember, the king was doing this to us. So we created, so you should be able to say anything against the government. Now, if you say something against another individual and it's libelous, defamatory, they can sue you back. But the government, you have every right to go off on them as much as you want. And here I had simply exposed the truth. They were deleting ballot images, which are the chain of custody in federal elections. So I saw that article, then I wanted to find a lawyer in Massachusetts to file a First Amendment lawsuit. No lawyer wanted to take this on, Jeffrey. They were all part of the swamp. So what happened was I had to learn the law. I had to file the federal lawsuit. I had to represent myself against 3 lawyers in federal court. So first of all, we filed 2 parts of the lawsuit. One was a $1.2 billion lawsuit. And the other one was what's called a restraining order. Because remember, I'm still in the middle of a federal election. I wanted the judge to have the government to stop contacting Twitter. So I go, and then first of all, judges don't like to even grant those hearings, those emergency hearings. Guess what? The judge granted me the hearing, number 1, which is a big victory. No news reported on it. I wrote to Tucker. He didn't report on it, okay? Because Tucker Carlson's part of the establishment. He's a grifter. He's a high-paid, rich boy grifter. He talks
I appreciate you saying that. He's absolutely 100% complicit with the deep state regime media.
Yeah, he's a grifter. He thinks he's smart. He makes those little smirks, as though he's so concerned. He didn't want to do anything on Hunter Biden. Anyway, so I had to represent myself. It was supposed to be a 1-hour hearing, Jeffrey. It ended up being a 4-hour hearing. And I successfully proved in court that they had violated, that it was part of what's called the Blum test, cat's paw libel. I had to learn all this jurisprudence. And I think the judge was positive. He gave me all the terms of the restraining order. He said the Secretary of State can no longer call Twitter. But the most important thing that every American needs to know is our lawsuit brought out the fact that the government has a Twitter partnership.
Yes.
They have a trusted Twitter partner. They have a bat phone. The rest of us plebeians, peasants, we don't have a hotline to Twitter if someone's saying nasty things, but the government does. It's called a trusted Twitter partnership. So they were able to call Twitter and say, take this guy off. Came out in testimony. In fact, they also came out in testimony called the National Association of State Election Directors, a woman called Amy Cohen. They also have a twisted, it should be trusted.
It is twisted.
It is twisted. They have a twisted, trusted Twitter partnership. So the judge told them not to call Twitter no longer, the Secretary of State, and furthermore said, if you have a problem with Dr. Idura, you go on Twitter and tweet against him. That's what you should be doing. It's an open forum. Why are you using backroom channels? So that lawsuit also was not dismissed. So that lawsuit's still alive. In fact, 2 weeks ago, the judge, by the way, on February 1st, that was back in September. On February 1st, after I did Mike Lindell's, he had me do a piece with him. I again shared those 4 emails on February 1st about the state election. Bam, I was thrown off Twitter this time forever. So we went back into court again, because what they did, and this is what's going on in the age of computers, when they first contacted Twitter, then they told the court, okay, we won't do it. Twitter, they asked Twitter also to put in the keywords. Whenever I would put up those 4 images and say the word of the state election director, Tassinari, that's her name, they would trigger that red flag. So we had to go back into court and educate the judge that what they had actually done was they lied to the court. When they contacted Twitter, they also had set up the red flag algorithm. So the judge, very interesting order he just gave. He said, he goes, before I can give you complete relief, I also want you to add Twitter to the lawsuit. So, which is great. So I think this judge wants to show or wants to see not only have the government called Twitter, but how these algorithms work. So again, no news media has reported on this. They will report on all of Trump's failed lawsuits, but they do not want to report on our lawsuits, which that one is hugely successful, and it'll be a First Amendment precedent. And it's already, the order we got on the TRO is huge because it shows government colluding with big tech. What they want to do is the powers that be want to not make this about the government, that we live in fascism. They want to make it, big tech just does stuff. Big tech. No, the government works with big corporations. That's called fascism. It's not even socialism. That's what China does. China has all the big leaders of their big companies, part of the Communist Party. They can call on them when they need to go screw somebody up. That's what we've entered fascism. And our lawsuit shows that clearly. So that's the first lawsuit. The second lawsuit, again, filed on our own, was we asked for decertification of the September 20th primary. The entire U.S. Senate election in Massachusetts, and decertification, and also want a hand recount. And the judge, in response to that, they filed massive number of paperwork, to get it dismissed. The judge denied their dismissal. Our third victory across these two cases. No media has covered this. No media. This is a federal lawsuit by a U.S. Senate candidate. Left and right have not covered this. Because both, and that's what's unfortunate with what's occurred with Trump. He had either really horrible lawyers, incompetent lawyers, or people who do not want to discuss the real crime scene of election fraud. It is the computer algorithms. And maybe it'll take an MIT guy who's got all these degrees, who came from nothing, to expose it, because what we're really talking about is we no longer have one person, one vote in this country, because those computer algorithms can flip votes. In my case, what we calculated in my second lawsuit, I did all the mathematical analysis, which no one has rebutted to this day, that my votes were multiplied by 0.666, 2/3. And the new analysis shows it's even worse than that. So no one like me or you, if we're coming bottoms up, can ever win an election in this country, ever. These elections are selections. They are not elections. So we need clean elections. That's what we need.
Dr. Shiva, you have worked very, very hard, obviously. I don't have 4 degrees from MIT. And frankly, from what I've studied, it looks like you contributed in excess of $1 million of your own money into your race. And still they were able to do to you what they have done to you. You're a great source of inspiration and hope for us. But what can you say to those of us that are terrified and horrified to see our republic go away, to those of us that know what you're speaking is true, but we don't have the resources that we know of to be able to fight this in any effective manner? What can we do right now on March 10th of 2021 to take our republic back and reestablish the foundational principle of one man or one person, one vote?
Yeah, so Jeffrey, you asked a great question. What I'm going to do is, Jeffrey, so there's only one way out of this. That is to build a bottoms-up movement, number one. Number two, that is to dump both of these political parties. I don't care if there are people who think Bernie's going to save them frankly, even Trump. It's not going to come from Trump or Bernie.
True.
Let go of all those illusions, because Trump had 4 years, and what ended up happening was Jared Kushner was running the White House. Okay? That's what was actually happening. Who's now getting a couple $100 million loan? I think he's securing from Israel. He was out for his own interests, and nothing happened to Hillary. So yeah, Trump may be a nice person, a lot of great words, lock her up, but nothing got locked up. The only people we can trust is the American or the working class people. So Jeffrey, can you play a video on? Can you, so to your viewers who are looking, and I'll do it over here. If people go to vashiva.com/join, can you go there, Jeffrey? I'm going to do it over here, and we can do this together. So if you go to vashiva.com/join, okay? And I'm going to go over here for our viewers here. So everyone here listening, Yep. Okay, so if you go there, Jeffrey, are you there?
I am here.
You can do a screen share on your side. Share that screen. You want me to do it here? I can do it here if you want.
Sure, you can do it there, and I can just allow you to share screen.
Okay, let me share the screen here for everyone. I'm going to do it for the audience over here too. And if we go over here,
and I'm going to go ahead and I'll add that to the stream.
Yeah, let me go. If everyone listening goes to vashiva.com/join, okay, and you will see that page. I think you can see it now, right, Jeffrey?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay, so if you go to this page, and I'm going to do it on my other stream over here so people here can see it.
Sure.
What we'll see is there is a way out of this, and it's as people know, I created the first email system as a 14-year-old kid, but something more important that I think I've done now that will help more people than even the invention of email is what I'm going to share with you here. Okay.
Well, some days I curse you and some days I bless you for that email invention, but that's beside.
Yeah. Well, I just have to do one thing here for my folks here. Just give me 2 seconds here.
And while you're doing that, Dr. Shiva, I read that you also developed a program that helped candidates or actually seated senators, congressmen to distribute their email. And before you leave, I wanted you to say, do you think it's even worth writing to them anymore? And if it is, are there things that we can do to make sure that our mail does get through?
Yep, I'll talk about that. So let me just do something here. So I'm going to play it here, and I'm going to have to, so basically, let me just introduce what I'm going to play here. So if everyone goes to vashiva.com/join, I'm going to play the video. So there is a solution on how we can win. And that solution is a movement for truth, freedom, and health. And I can say this as with confidence and with unequivocation, because, you know, just like when you take engineering science and you understand how gravity works or electricity works or magnetism work, there are principles to changing the world, Jeffrey. And that principle is the principles of understanding systems. So once you understand how systems work, you can change the world. The science of systems understands how your body works, how a computer works, how political systems work. And I have built that science together over the last 40 years. And using those scientific principles, 3 important pillars come out of it. The reason to interconnect truth, freedom, and health. The reason we need to build a bottoms-up movement. And third, why we need to be aware of the real insidious people, the not so obvious establishment who destroy political movements. So I'm going to play this video for everyone, and we'll let it run, Jeffrey, and then it'll end, and then we'll come back but there is a solution. We need people to get educated. We need people to build a movement. And what I've done on vashiva.com is people can come here. Let me just come back to this for a second. I'm sorry, still sharing that. When people, that's okay. When people go to vashiva.com, they can sign up as a member, but we've created our own infrastructure. We have literally an educational institute on that infrastructure. Twitter, Facebook, no one can take it off. We also have created the equivalents of social media so people can build community as they get educated. And third, we give people things to do. We actually give them flyers and instruments that they can do to go do activism in their local community. So I'm going to play this here, Jeffrey. Ready? Can you hear this?
Yes, sir.
We have allowed our country to be taken over from within, and the end goal is you will have a homogenized world where we will become slaves, because there is a condition among the elites that really thinks they're better than you, deep down inside them, that you don't deserve the freedoms you have. They don't. This reality is what people need to wake up to, and we need to all unite working people. We only allow a movement that can do that. And that is the movement that we started creating here in Massachusetts, the movement for truth, freedom, and health. Look, I've been a student of politics since I was a 4-year-old kid, studying revolutionary movements, left wing, right wing. There's a physics, there's a nuclear science to destroying the establishment. To build a bridge, you need to understand Newton's equation. You need to understand the laws of gravity. You need to understand Poisson's ratio. There is a way to build a revolution, and that's why I put this together. My goal is to train a army of truth, freedom, and health leaders. We don't need followers like social media. We need leaders, but they need training, because the educational system does not teach them history, nothing. So in 3 hours, that's what I've started doing. That's the solution. We got to train people. First, with understanding what a system is. The second is understanding the interconnection between truth, freedom, and health. Freedom is the ability to move freely, communicate freely, right? Talk freely. Without freedom, you cannot convert ideas, hypothesis into truth, which is science. And without freedom, you can't really get to truth. And without truth, you make up fake problems and fake solutions, which means you destroy our health. And without health, which is the infrastructure of us and our body, you can't fight for freedom. Third concept is it has to be bottoms up. Working people, people who work united. And what the right wing has done is whenever you say working people unite, that must be communist. Meanwhile, they'll let the Democrats run unions, which suppress workers. Completely corrupt. But when you look at the arc of American history, it's been when working people came up. We need to go local. Every solution I'm coming up with as a part of this movement, we're giving the science, which is the truth, and then we tell people what they can do on the ground. Like with election fraud, you don't need to wait for some lawyer. Our goal is to train people, Dave, to go local, to go local, to go local, fight locally. Forget lawyers, forget politicians, forget celebrities. You got to learn politics, and there is a science to it. They lock us down, we should be ready to shut them down. And the fourth part of this principle is a not so obvious establishment. So when you look at a system, there's always something that disturbs you from getting to your goal. Well, the biggest disturbance is the not so obvious establishment, which are those people who claim they're for you, on the left and the right. The Al Sharptons who tell black people I'm for you. The Tucker Carlsons. Do you think any true anti-establishment person will ever be on Fox or CNN? I don't think so. They both mislead working people back into the establishment. Without this solid understanding of political physics and theory, you're screwed. You're going to follow on the left wing, Bernie Sanders. Oh, he said something. Or Robert Kennedy. Scumbags. Or you're going to follow, some right-wing talk show host. They're not going to lead us to liberation. It's us. And that political physics, it's a nuclear science of change. Bottoms up. We have to organize to understand that there is people who talk a good game and then look at what they actually do, left and right. I'm sorry, Sean Hannity may say some good things, but I don't see the urgency in his voice to get something done. And it can only come when you weaponize yourself with the right knowledge. You need to be able to identify a rat. Christ didn't go after the Romans, right? It was the Pharisees and the Sadducees who screwed him up. His own quote unquote people. And that's where we're at. So these 4 concepts I've built into a curriculum. People can go to bashiva.com, and it's an educational program. We need to train people in political theory. You need to have physics. And I've created that curriculum. People need to get educated. We need to get educated fast. And within a half an hour, I can teach people. 2 years of MIT control systems, I teach people those concepts. Then I apply it. Anyone can understand it. And then you say, oh, I got to build a bottoms-up movement. They have to get politically astute, and then they have to go locally and act, not sit there on social media. They have to act locally, defy locally, do civil obedience locally, but with knowledge on how to build a movement. The Senate campaign's expanded to the Movement for Truth, Freedom, and Health, and they can find it on V as in Victor, A, Shiva, vashiva.com, so people can sign in. They can get access to a bunch of videos. If they want to take a course and become a Truth, Freedom, Health leader, I offer a full scholarship there, but we want people to make a commitment that they'll study, that they'll get certified, that they'll go do activities on the ground. So go to VA Shiva, Victory America Shiva, vashiva.com.
Dr. Shiva, that is powerful.
Yeah.
That is powerful. That is what I call a real world solution. And, I've worked hard for President Trump. I met President Trump. I like President Trump. But when he's going around the country, giving out endorsements and talking about building the Republican Party, these are not anything that is going to help us. You're talking about a real solution. You're talking about real empowerment. And I'm encouraging everybody to go to vashiva.com/join and get active today.
Yeah, look, this is, as I talk about, look, I spent, I gave money to the Trump campaign, supported it heavily, but you have to understand that we're at a point that no change is going to come from these political parties. And the amount of beating that we're going to do, people say, well, maybe I can join my local precinct. I can do that. They control it all. You're going into the devil's den. And the amount of incremental change you can attempt to make there, you're better off going to your local communities and using the VA Shiva platform. Because what have we done there, Jeffrey, to everyone listening, is you have to start with education. People think suffering that a great man once said ignorance is the cause of all suffering, right?
Right.
So imagine the times when there was a time when we thought we would always have darkness. We would never have light during the night, right? We lived like, if you want to think as cavemen, right? Well, then we learned physics and we learned electricity and we learned magnetism. And then someone created the thing called the light bulb. Well, that was impossible. The fact that we would have light during the day, think about that, or night. And then the concept of flying was seen as impossible. Well, people used to, the story of Icarus, right? Putting wax on it, and that didn't work, right? Or jumping off, flapping. You've seen all those old videos. Then we figured out Bernoulli's principle, which is a scientific principle that says how, movement of air can create a lift, or a perpendicular lift, right? That was the basis of creating aircraft. And now we have restaurants up in the sky, right? Think about that. And then, we electrified places. This is quite extraordinary, but it all came from understanding science, engineering principles, to be more specific. So if you apply that, so people are saying, well, it's impossible, I guess. The world's always going to suck. There will be the rich and there will be this, and they'll screw us and they'll always, no, it's not true. It will be true if you do not understand the engineering principles. Separate from the invention of email, separate from all the degrees I did at MIT, I guess my greatest invention or my innovation will be delivering to this world the scientific principles of systems, foundations of systems. Because once you understand the science of everything, which is the foundations of systems, and I can take a bunch of years of MIT. In 1 hour, I teach this to people on Monday nights. 1 hour. It's taken me 20 years to figure out how to teach that to people. That's in our Warrior course, vashiva.com/warrior. Then, in the next couple of hours, I teach you to take that knowledge and teach you 3 scientific principles. They are scientific principles. One principle is the deep interconnection between freedom, truth, and health. Without freedom, which is a motion of things, which is a scientific attribute in physics, transport, you cannot get to truth because you can't have dialogue, you can't practice a scientific method, convert guesses to truth, which is what the scientific method does. That's a process of conversion of information, matter, and energy. That's truth. The third is once you have truth, now you're able to understand what the real problem is in a situation. Should you be wearing masks as a way to protect public health all day, or should you boost the immune system? Should we lower pollution, or should we brand CO2 as a pollutant, which is what the Paris Accords do? So truth lets you get to the real problems for our environmental health, for our physical health, infrastructure health. And with health, which is a structural part of any system, you can now have the strength to fight for freedom. Now, so that's the first principle. The second principle is nature is decentralized. We don't have one big cell in our body. We have 6 trillion cells. So to think, oh, that celebrity, Trump, Bernie, this politician is going to do anything, that party is completely anti-natural law. We have to go bottoms up. Second, the third is the biggest enemy of these movements is called the disturbance that gets in our way. Like the devil, right? The devil's constantly there to test you. Is the not so obvious establishment? Is the Bernies? It's to the Democrats listening. It's not, it's your real enemy is Bernie Sanders. Your real enemy is AOC. Your real enemy is the Robert Kennedys, who talk a good game. They're all talkers, but they are created by the establishment to manipulate you back to Hillary, back to Biden. Okay, because at the last minute, they'll say, well, the lesser of two evils. This guy, Robert Kennedy, frankly called his technical term a scumbag, which he is. He talks a good game, but what did he actually do? He endorsed Hillary Clinton 3 times. Who got $100 million from the Gates Foundation for vaccines. All right. That's who he endorses. Doesn't matter what he says. He tells people to negotiate with the back room. In New Jersey, we won the medical exemption thing because I told people to build a bottoms up movement and we scared the hell out of those lawmakers. That's how you win. Right. On the right, you have the same thing. You have the talk show host, right? Like Tucker Carlson. He'll make his grimaces talk, but he's an entertainer. He watches which way the wind blows. He watches where his bread is buttered, what he has to say to be like the right wing of the right. And that's unfortunately what Trump is serving now. Trump is not saying, let's build an independent movement. He's driving people back into the Republican Party. And that's what Bernie does. And this is hard for me to share this critique, but that is what it is. So the only way out is to build a bottoms up movement. And what I've created here for people, it's for you. Now, our goal, Jeffrey, is to have about 50,000 people trained. We call them Truth, Freedom, and Health Warriors. So these people are like nuclear physicists of revolutionary change. Because without that knowledge, they're going to be fumbling around. They're going to have these illusions. Well, maybe I should work with my local Democratic Party. Maybe I should work with my local Republican Party. They're not going to do anything. Nothing. Because they all are united against you. The eagle has 2 wings, the left and the right, Republican and Democrat. And it has its far right elements and its far left elements, which always sucker people back in. If you take a systems approach, what we're saying is you need to build a bottoms up movement. And all change, if you look at it, in fact, as that video shared, go back to how did we get infrastructure? How did we end child labor? How did we get nutrition? How do we really bring down infectious diseases from the 1900s to before even the vaccine, measles vaccine was created? It was from infrastructure. And how did we get the infrastructure? It wasn't from the Republicans and Democrats. There was militant movements bottoms up on the ground of the American working class, not a bunch of rich white liberals in the 60s, wearing, draping themselves with tie-dye. No, the real movements were in the late 1800s and the early 1900s when working people rose up. And when they rose up, that scared the hell out of the establishment. Starting in the 1950s, they created the McCarthy era to tell people anytime you organize bottoms up, you must be a communist. And therefore, the left wing used that to create their top-down unions. So the left and the right squeeze the American worker. If you are an American worker today and you're making $50,000, you should be making 120 grand. Because over the last 45 years, since 1971, when the unions all sold you out, and the unions basically striked agreements with big corporations that they would no longer strike, the number of work stoppages went down. We lost the edge of the working class movement, and wages dropped. In fact, not only did wages drop, wages were transferred. So there's two American pies today. One American pie, which is about this big, which is for the 95%, and one, this is this big, which is owned by the 5%. And over the last 50 years, wages got transferred from the American worker over here. In 2018 alone, $2.7 trillion got transferred. And I mean, what happened over the last 4 years? We blamed Obama. $6.2 trillion got printed. Why? Because the elites have been running an economy on low interest rates, which is not based on anything. The interest rate should be around 6 to 8%. So Trump was a vehicle used to keep the interest rates low to make sure the American working class would not rise up. So my view at this point, from everything I've studied, even 2016 was a selection. They wanted Trump in there, Jeffrey. They needed Trump. You know why? Because a great reset was coming to slow down the economy. And the only force against that great reset would have been the American working class, because they have weapons. The Indian working class doesn't have weapons. The Chinese working class doesn't. The Australian working class has been disarmed. So they needed Trump and the stupid Q movement there saying, follow the plan, the plan, the plan. So 4 years, the working class in this country was waiting for seventh dimensional chess to take place. And what happened was we were on the verge of forced vaccinations. Everyone's running around wearing masks with this fear. A lot of small businesses got obliterated. Jared Kushner's going to do well. Ivanka's buying a $50 million home next to Tom Brady. That's who's doing well. So we need to wake up. It's not Trump or it's not Bernie. It is the working people. And what I'm here to tell you is that we don't have one person, one vote. Tonight, everyone should listen to what I'm going to talk about. We're launching the Clean Elections campaign. We have the solution to take back this country. It's going to be bottoms up. It's not going to be by these political parties. Do not trust Trump. Do not trust Bernie. Do not trust any of these people anymore, because they are part of the elite. They're billionaires. I don't care. It's in the old days, two kings fighting against each other. Maybe it's a good fight, but at the end of the day, they may make some incremental change, but there's not going to be any substantive change. And that's what we saw. 600 billionaires doubled their income. Jeff Bezos went from, in March of 2020, his net worth was 116 billion. Now it's 220 billion. Okay? 600 billionaires doubled their wealth. Well, if you were a working person, you couldn't go shopping. You were at home. You got sicker. You got more depressed. You got more anxious, while they profited off of you. And that was during Trump. And I don't want to hear people say, well, Trump couldn't do this. He couldn't do that. Poor Trump, poor Trump, poor Trump. No, poor Trump lives in Mar-a-Lago. Okay? Don Jr. goes and hunts poor animals, on his safaris. Again, Ivanka Trump and Jared are buying a beautiful home now next to Brady's. You're not. You probably lost your wages. So stop being bad for Trump or bad for the Democrats. Feel bad for yourselves. And that's why I'm saying the only way out is for people to get educated. Otherwise, they're going to have illusions. They're going to have illusions of the Q or China. I'm sorry, China can't do anything without complicity from Americans here. Aliens can't do anything, or reptiles can't do anything, if you believe in all this, without complicity from red-blooded Americans. John Boehner, a Republican, is a lobbyist for China, okay? Point the finger at him. Point the finger at those Harvard administrators and MIT administrators who take money from China, all right? Don't point it at China. It takes two to tango.
Absolutely right.
Dr.
I want to make a prediction real quickly. Within the next 10 years, you will not be remembered as the man who invented email. You will be remembered as the man who stood tall and strong and pioneered and led a army of Americans to take back their divinity, their sovereignty, and their freedom. That will be your lasting legacy. And another thing that I know we're out of time, but I just want to touch on, and you've touched with this with my great friend, young Pharaoh, they want to also try to get us in a race war, and we simply cannot allow that to happen.
Yeah, you nailed it. Look, it's a very good point. The real racists are on both sides. Look, there is a real racism. The right wing doesn't want to talk about the real racism, so they deny it. Therefore, the left wing owns the word racism, and they define it in very small bounds, okay? They define it as don't use the N-word, right? Affirmative action, which actually pits poor blacks against poor whites. The real racism is segregation of using some property. It could be a skin color one day. Tomorrow, it could be someone's ideas, right? Their thought. It could be their skill set. That's segregation. Racism is a subset of segregation. I've experienced all forms of it. I grew up in India where we were considered untouchables, where my family's future job was to pick coconuts for the rest of their lives, okay? It was called the caste system. In India, my mother would say you can get discriminated, segregated in 9 different ways. Man or woman, what region of the country you came from, what color of the skin you have, what language you spoke, right? What caste you were from, so on. In America, you get discriminated about 3 ways. So she said you have a better shot here, okay, when we first moved here. But my point is that the right wing doesn't want to talk about racism because they need racism just as much as the left, because they want to convince a poor white working class they're supporting them. And the left wants to convince them that they're for the workers and the blacks. But when you really look at it, every part, in Massachusetts, we have a bunch of these horrible scumbag right-wing talk show hosts who actually supported the other guy who photoshopped a picture with Trump. And they used to do hit jobs on me. A guy called Howie Carr, he takes advantage of the white working class. No different than Al Sharpton taking advantage of the black working class. You see, they need racism, but they never want to address the real racism. When I first moved into Belmont, I live in a very interesting town, predominantly all whites when I moved here. I have a very nice home. People like me aren't supposed to live, a lot of liberal elites here. Well, one day, cops showed up to my house, and they didn't believe I lived here, Jeffrey. They burst into my house, okay? The chief of police of my town in Belmont was thrown out because for 20 years he had a guy on his staff who was sodomizing minorities as they drove through their town. So that's real racism. There is real racism, okay? Yeah. But the town never wanted to address that, right? And so there's a real racism, and then there's a fake racism. The fake racism is you don't address racism by saying don't use the N-word. You address racism by addressing racism through education head on. But the right wing and the left wing rely on racism. They need it. They rely on racism, and they want race war, because when you don't have race war, we don't get to the real issue. The real us versus them is the working people who are real Americans who follow the principle of this country versus the elites. How does I hate this guy, Jared Kushner, for some reason. I don't know why. But here's a guy who never worked, gets into Harvard because his dad gave $2.5 million. He ran slums here in Somerville when he was here. Then he gets to be the senior advisor at the age of 30-something. Come on. He didn't deserve that. I'm sorry. He didn't deserve, him and Ivanka does not deserve to be senior advisors in the White House. I'm sorry. You didn't earn that. You got the freaking birth lottery. And Trump should never have allowed them into the White House. And then Trump did not release Assange. He had it a momentous occasion. What did he do? He gave a pardon to Jared Kushner's father, who hired a prostitute to blackmail his own brother-in-law. This is not American values. I'm sorry. So yes, Trump said a lot of great things. Yes, he took hits at the establishment. And that's why I voted for him. But you know what? He is the right version of Bernie. Talks a good game, but he didn't follow through. He didn't have any bench. He didn't bring in people like me. There were a lot of people he could have brought in. But yes, we are creating an army, Jeffrey, of going at the real issue. The real issue is, and by the way, I'm not here to convince people. We don't need everyone. We don't have time to convince everyone. Those people who get it, Jeffrey, you and others, every Monday evenings, and we're going to build a bottoms-up movement, which will always say, do not give interviews to the mainstream media. They're not going to do anything. It's like you have to have certain principles. Don't even talk to them anymore. Why? They're nobody. Go talk to your neighbors. Go educate those people on the website, Jeffrey, people go, there's a card that this is like one of our flyers. This flyer says go beyond vax, anti-vax. It's got our branding. It's from Dr. Shiva. And then the back of it teaches them the science and the public health implications of the real issue of boosting immunity. And then it gives them a link, Jeffrey, where they can go, they have the whole research paper. So this is a weapon. We have another weapon like that for masks, another weapon we're going to have for election integrity. We're going to do this bottoms up. And if you have any illusions about the Republicans or Democrats, go for it. You're going to be wasting your time. You're going to wake up 20 years from now, and you're going to say, I wasted my time. That's what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Dr. Shiva, you said it so well. We're at the point today where we're not trying to convince everybody. We're looking for the people that are already convinced that we've got a problem. Here we sit. We've been disillusioned. We're disheartened by what has happened, but we have that thing that burns within us that says this isn't right, and we're not ready to give up. We can fix it. What we can do is quit. Okay, we've had some time. We've mourned. We understand we got fooled. That's okay. Now it's time for those of us that know what's going on to wake up, to band together. I mean, you've got people like me, people like Dr. Shiva, people like young Pharaoh. You can't have three more different personalities, but yet we're joining together with a same common cause to take our republic back. Please give us the website to go to again, Dr. Shiva. I am with you. I am for you. I'm going to stand together and fight with you. I know we can take our republic back.
Yeah, so people should go to vashiva.com/join or vashiva.com/ you can post. I'm going to put it vashiva.com/join, or people can go to vashiva. You can post it on yours too, because I don't have control of that.
Absolutely.
Or vashiva.com. Yeah, so I think young Farrah and I are probably going to do a co-stream on this shortly, but there is a way out, and that's the technology I've created. In many ways, it's a technology. The technology gives you education when you log in. It gives you a platform where people can start communicating. In fact, what I can do is, let me share that with people right here. So when people log in, let me share the screen again here. I think that's the screen, right? So
yes,
people go here. So everyone on here, take time to go to VH once you sign in. And by the way, I don't want people to give me money if they for nothing, right? So people are contributing. We have our own data center, by the way. I used to run the data center for the largest companies in the world. So when people log in, they can contribute. But when people contribute, they can also commit to an educational program. So one of the educational programs, if I go to vashiva.com/warrior, is a warrior program. And it's a very small, I used to teach this course at MIT, by the way, okay, where people pay thousands of dollars. But it's a systems course. But we anyone who contributes $100 gets this. So it's sort of nothing, but people learn systems theory. In 1 hour, people are going to get an MIT education on systems. Then they also get access to the courses and they can get certified. Then they get access to a tool. They can actually understand, Jeffrey, how those same principles affect their body. So the same principles we can use to change the world, it's the same principles you can use to change yourself. You can figure out what kind of system you are, how you're off course, that's a black dot, and how food supplements can bring you back on course. Then you get access to the book System and Revolution, 3 more books, the scientific theory, etc. So that's the first thing. The next thing people get is when they log into the dashboard, which is in our own platform, Jeffrey. So people are not going to get thrown off, right? This is in our own infrastructure. I built this infrastructure. So when people get access, first of all, they get access to a community where they can literally go here and they can look at all these people. This is just in the last week or so. People are coming in. These are our Truth, Freedom, and Health warriors, okay? And they are actually able to create their own conversations. So look at all these conversations going on, okay? I don't know if you can see this, Jeffrey.
We can. We see it clearly.
So people are having, so for example, but, you talk about 5G or vaccines, you get thrown off. So here, people are having conversations. And this can also be accessible through people's iPhones.
They've always told us, don't ever talk about religion and don't talk about politics, because that's the two things they use to control us, and they don't want us communicating and coming to agreement and understanding around those two controls. Right.
So we have like 24 different groups. So this is a second tool. This is for our warriors to interconnect. And every day more and more warriors are joining. And the warriors can create their own pages on here. It's the equivalent of Facebook without Mark Zuckerberg involved. And you can see people coming from all over the world. and they're signing up. They're creating friendships. These are our truth, freedom, and health warriors. They can interconnect. And then we have all these tools. You have the tool, Your Body, Your System. All the courses are there. There's several books here. I mean, we give a ton. And then most importantly, people can get activated, Jeffrey. So they're not sitting around, okay, I learned, I'm on this social. Here's a card, for example, that'll teach the front of the card. People can print this out. We have close to 250,000 of these cards, which our warriors are printing out and handing out to their friends. So here's the truth about what you can do with masks, okay? The truth is, the science is on the back, the public health implications. What this card educates people. You can hand this to a Starbucks worker, your pizza store guy, your local parent whose kids are being forced to wear masks. We don't want to attack them. We want to educate them. It tells them, look, when you put that mask on, how it affects the oral microbiome in the mouth. It teaches them about what they can do to public health. They should, if you're an employee and you're working for an employer and he's forcing you to wear masks all day, tell them, look, I need more dental health insurance because you're going to screw up my mouth, right? Parents should ask for tax credits because if they don't want their kids to wear masks and they're pulling them out. So this is a weapon that people can use and they can take action locally. Similarly, there's another tool on vaccines like I just shared. And there'll be more. So for every issue, Jeffrey, I'll come back. What we're doing is you can bring it back, Jeffrey. So we're educating people. We're giving people actual scientific, like the nuclear physics of change. Then we're giving people a community of other alumni. And then we're also giving people what they can actually do. So on election fraud, you're going to see, we're going to talk about that people can actually go to their local towns and demand they get 2 pieces of data from the 2020 elections. Forget Trump's lawyers. I mean, Giuliani was getting paid $100,000 a week. I didn't get paid a penny. And all the guys that were working with us, we're the ones who did the Michigan analysis, the Arizona, for nothing. That went explosive. We didn't get paid. Those guys raised $300 million because, you have to understand the elites will talk about some horrible issue like climate change or weather or whatever it is, right? Not to really solve it, but to use that. They'll even talk about cancer. We haven't solved cancer, but the Susan Komen Foundation built a $1.2 billion foundation out of it. She got $9 million for pension, and we still haven't solved breast cancer. You see nice, beautiful little pink ribbons, but there's no solution to it. Or the pharma guys will never give their solution, and they will suffocate real solutions, which come from natural products or lifestyle, etc. So that's what we have today. So if people are serious and you want to get the education, I've created it. It's like there is electricity. Do you want to use a light bulb or do you want to live in darkness? You don't have to, but it probably helps because once you have a light bulb and you have light, you can do other things with your life. So that's what this technology is. It's like the light bulb. That's what I've created. And I think with no hubris at all here, I think the invention of email is a pretty big thing. Cytosol, which is my new thing, which helps us model the molecular pathways on the body, EchoMail. But I would say this creation, Truth, Freedom, and Health, the platform, is probably the most important thing I'll do because it brings together everything. My love of medicine, engineering, science, political change into one platform. All right, Jeffrey, it was great. Thank you.
I have to agree with you, Dr. Shiva. And I get constantly asked, what can we do? What can we do? Now we know. Dr. Shiva, you may not have been born in this country, but you are a true American hero, and we salute you for being here.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Be well.
Take care, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Shiva, all I can say is wow. Wow. We have had our asses kicked, ladies and gentlemen. There's no doubt about it. We've had our asses kicked, and we are licking our wounds. That's normal. So we've had our time to mourn. We've had our time to feel bad. Now it's time for those of us that are true warriors to get busy. We've unindoctrinated ourselves in several areas. Now it's time to complete the unindoctrination process. And I believe Dr. Shiva can help us do that. Go check out his information. I'm going to do it. We'll be talking more about it in the future. I'm going to thank Dr. Shiva for being with us. And tonight, we'll be back at 10 p.m. for Late Night in the Heartland. I know it's been bad. I know it's been rough. But now we are inspired. And now we have real solutions and a real path to walk on. And folks, that's all we need, because we are the last generation of real humans. We are divine. We are sovereign. We are free. And now we've got a systematic, inclusive plan to show us what to do and how to do it. Thank you so much to Dr. Shiva. But remember, it's not Dr. Shiva going to save the world. It's Jeffrey Daugherty and Ari Armin and Bill Sibley and Patty Gracia and Organic Intelligence and every one of you, Kimmy Moss. You are the ones who are going to save the world. Together, we're going to save the world. And at the end of the day, it is about race, ladies and gentlemen. Not the black race, not the white race, not the yellow race, not the red race, but it's the human race. And they've written us off, but they have no idea what they've started. Thank you, Dr. Shiva. Thank you, Late Night in the Heartland family. And we'll see you tonight again at 10 p.m. Central Time for 2 hours of podcast excellence and your calls. I look forward to seeing every one of you there. And once again, our thanks to Dr. Shiva. Thanks to Young Pharaoh for introducing me to Dr. Shiva. And we will be working together. And the best is yet to come. Our nation, our world will be better than it's ever been, sooner than you can ever imagine, because of you and me. Because we're the last generation of real humans. And we're about to unindoctrinate ourselves and get busy. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. This has been the Unindoctrination Station. We'll see you again tonight for Late Night in the Heartland.